historical perspective, and I'm also going to talk about the public relations thing, which I think is historic too, as Tom alluded to. And of course, it's a map of our province. How many public meetings did the Fathers of Confederation have? In New Brunswick, they had a lot, right? The Antis as well. So I'm looking at this from the point of view of New Brunswick history, and I see this as, and the thoughts were first prepared when MOU 1 was out, and I thought this is about the 7th or 8th biggest thing ever to happen in New Brunswick history since 1867. That's provincial policy, right? So I was very intrigued by the fact that it just came out of nowhere and there was no process. I was also intrigued by the fact that politicians seem to be hiding behind business groups, private media, and that type of thing, and that the various messages that were put out there against opponents of the deal. So I'm just looking at 4 or 5 or 6 maybe examples. In the past few of the significant public policy decisions which altered New Brunswick history, over which New Brunswickers had control, like World War II, New Brunswick had no control of that, right? Were made overnight without fair warning, without ongoing awareness and debate. Now the standards change over time. I think our standards now are higher than they were even 20 years ago. What I'm seeing as an historian is a 1950s approach, a backroom sort of approach, with the modern addition of Hill and Moulton, right? Which is very scary from the point of view of democracy. Anyway, so Confederation. New Brunswick joined Confederation in 1867 after considerable public discussion, lots of meetings, lots of ink spilled, maybe some blood spilled, and 2 elections. One that was won by the Antis in 1866, who didn't want New Brunswick to join Confederation, led by Albert J. Smith, Belleville County. And the second, won by Samuel Leonard Tilley in 1867, with a coalition that wanted New Brunswick to be part of Confederation. So there was a 3 or 4 year discussion going on. Moving down the road, I happen to work in alcohol policy, so I was attracted to this. But really, if you think about a big decision, prohibition, you can't drink. Bars have to close. You can't go to a liquor store. If you're caught with booze, you're going to be thrown in jail. That's a pretty big policy. That took about 30 years of lobbying, meetings, interest groups, debates, referenda, straw votes, parties trying to dodge the issue. Finally, in 1916, the conservative regime of George Clark, with great reluctance, agreed to bring in provincial prohibition, which went into effect in 1917. It didn't drop out of the sky. It didn't drop out of the sky. It was controversial, and again, this is one of the many posters you'll find, temperance posters from the time. Prohibition was in place for about, if we had more time, we could talk about votes for women. Same thing. It didn't drop out of the sky. It changed the provincial constitution, giving women the right to vote provincially around 1918 and 1990. Okay, let's take prohibition away so that these guys could later go on TV and drink stubby beer, Bob and Doug McKenzie. Prohibition was dismantled in 1927. It didn't drop out of the sky. The Baxter government, the Conservatives, were actually elected in 1925 on a policy of we're going to enforce prohibition. But the fine print was, if we feel it's not working, if the public doesn't like it, we might look at what was called government control, bringing in government control liquor stores. In 1927, they did that. Now, at the time, there was a lot of, criticism. How can you do that? You were elected to enforce prohibition. Government knew that about half the population or more did not support prohibition by 1927. So again, it didn't drop out of the sky. There was a debate. The government was re-elected. The Baxter government, the Tories were re-elected in 31. Okay, equal opportunity. Louis J. Robichaud, modernization of New Brunswick's infrastructure, our quiet revolution, centralization of provincial authority, changes to the tax structure, municipalities losing control over education, losing control over the justice system, losing control over health. Money from the have regions of the province being shifted to the have-not regions. That's the 10-second tour of equal opportunity. Hugely controversial. Very controversial, right? All sorts of resistance to it. It didn't occur overnight. There were royal commissions, there were task forces. Robichaud fought 4 elections and won 3 of them. Okay? Yes, liberals were split, conservatives were split, but you know, these are major changes in our provincial history, and they did not come out of the blue and come out and drop out of the sky. This was also part of the war on poverty, right, which was really the 1960s. The equal opportunity was heralded by major studies and propelled by election victories in 1963 and 67. Similarly, the adoption of official bilingualism actually started under Robichaud, right, in the late 60s, was continued by Hatfield, and moving on beyond that, even into the 1990s and 1993. Hatfield is done in 87. Then you have McKenna for 10 years and so on. In 1995, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, part of our national constitution, was amended to give the two official language groups in New Brunswick recognition in provincial institutions. That did not fall out of the sky. There were debates, there were task force, there were commissions, there were elections. There was a lot of discussion. And so, in the broader realm of New Brunswick history, this is, in terms of its scale, like if New Brunswick had a constitution, I would see this as almost a constitutional issue in terms of its importance, but can't quite use that term. But it's unprecedented. It's unprecedented in its size and the haste in which it's being done, and also this type of thing that Mr. Mann alluded to. Why do we need Peel and Knowlton to come into New Brunswick like we're a third world banana republic to convince us of a deal, and worse, taking $1 from everyone in this room for the retainer fee, multiplied by the whole province? Now, Mr. Mann alluded to Peel and Knowlton's political work. They have been targeted by Human Rights Watch and other organizations for the work they've done with China, Turkey, the Maldives, Peru, Egypt, Indonesia. These are all repressive regimes at different points in their history since the 90s. They developed working for big tobacco and selling a big business message in the United States. Of course, they are involved in the Friends of Kuwait. Remember the babies in the incubators? That was a Hill and Knowlton operative, right? Creating public opinion to go into the first Gulf War. They also were involved in Exxon Valdez, 3 Mile Island. This is the group that the government of New Brunswick is hiring to use against the opposition to the deal. There's a book on Native history, I think it's about the Iroquois, called "Is the Crown at War with Us?" And you also talk about what the Native groups talk about the honor of the Crown, usually in a very ironic way. I'm just wondering what this says about the honor of the Crown in New Brunswick. You know, how is it going to be remembered historically? You know, I'm always thinking of that because I'm an historian. You know, I can't wait 30 years from now. I won't be around. Maybe some student here will be a professor or a researcher who can get their hands on the documents 30 years from now, declassified, find out what really happened, right? Anyway, so Hill and Knowlton is scary stuff. Just say one with the China Normalization Initiative. In the 90s, China was in danger of losing its most favored nation trading status with the United States. There was a lot of pressure with the Clinton administration, and it wasn't just the Chinese government that hired Hill and Knowlton to improve the reputation of China, but the big American corporations hired them in something called the China Normalization Initiative. And trying to get around awkward little facts like the execution of 11,000 people a year, many for fairly minor offenses, right? Because there's money to be made in China. So let's hire Hill and Knowlton and we'll get the message out. So again, what I'm seeing is information management. I think it's very cynical, and in terms of our history, it's a very dark chapter. And it's not helped by the structure of the media in this province. So I'm now getting into modern politics. I wanted to keep it historical, but I do see this as one of the 6 or 7 biggest, if it goes through, in terms of its significance, one of the 6 or 7 biggest changes in our history that's a provincial policy since Confederation. And it's just nuts when you look at it historically compared to the so-called primitive standards of the past. Thank you.